This program is part of the Cosmic Potato Podcast Network. For more shows like this, visit our website at cosmicpotatonetwork.com.
Watching television, watching television. Watching television, watching television. I need all the image, I need all the sound. I know the info right into my mind.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Trial by Pilot. This is the show where we judge an entire series of television and the work of hundreds on one episode. I'm Bill Lynch.
I'm Elizabeth Lynch.
And we're still in COVID quarantine.
Yes.
And so we thought we need to find something light, easygoing. What can we just binge without thinking much about?
Right.
And so we picked When They See Us,
Right.
a 4-part Netflix miniseries that was released in 2019, last year, directed by Ava DuVernay, who also did Selma and 13th.
Oh, yeah. I've been hearing a lot about that.
Yeah. So obviously we wanted to do something last week kind of on the topic of racial issues. And instead we released Space Force.
Right.
Because that's what we had recorded, people.
That's what we had. So our apologies. But this is actually a show that we had discussed doing last year. And we shied away from it because we were afraid to talk about it. Being a podcast made up of only white people talking about a show about black people, I think it made us a little bit nervous and shy to talk about it. Like it was not our place to talk about.
Yeah, that's the way I would put it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was nervous to talk about it. I just felt like why would my opinion be important? It's not.
Right.
But a lot of shit has gone down
Yeah.
over the last week. And it's important for all of us to speak up on these issues.
Right.
Even and maybe especially if it's just our white friends and family listening.
Right.
And actually, I've been watching a lot of webinars and listening to podcasts on the topic, and that's even more important. Like, black people don't need to hear our middle class white privileged take on this.
Right.
But it's
Like,
our
oh my God, do you know that people are really racist? And like now is the time to not be?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like
But it's other privileged white people that need to hear
Right.
us speak out about this stuff.
And we don't actually know the full demographics of our audience, but I'm going to venture a guess that it's mostly just our family and friends.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not all. So I certainly hope we have some black listeners and other
Yeah.
people of color, but I have a feeling it's a lot of white people out
Yeah.
there.
And I mean, we have talked about other uncomfortable things with some of the shows that we've watched.
Yeah.
But
Unbelievable.
I don't know if we intentionally pick the shows we pick with mostly white casts. I mean, I think when it's like got a diverse cast, it's one of the things like, I love the diversity in this show. I love how they're showing diversity in this school.
Right.
But a show about black people is not something that we have done
Right.
before.
Yes, that's true.
You know?
I know that John from Captain Game Show sometimes listens. I hope he always listens. But John, I would love to hear your take on this show. I'm sure we'll chat about it on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna go through the pilot like we usually do. It's still trial by pilot, but then we're gonna talk a little bit deeper afterwards and maybe offer up some resources for people that we have found helpful over the last week or two.
Yeah.
So we start in Harlem, April 19th, 1989. And I'm gonna really try to refrain from talking about The Wire because the very first scene has Michael K. Williams in it, Omar Little
Right.
from The Wire. But
He has had other jobs.
I know. Oh, I mean, come on, he's Omar.
I know, but
He's having lunch with his son, and they're just like ribbing each other, talking about the Yankees. And then we go through and we meet all of these black kids living in New York. There's a young kid and he has a sick mom. Another kid's hanging out with his girlfriend, cutting school. And we're just introduced to them that way, like just like brief moments in the life of kind of.
right.
And
Very normal life of young kids.
right. Yeah. And that evening, there's this like big group of kids running through the streets, and they're all heading to Central Park, and like slowly our 5 protagonists get like picked up along the way. Like 2 of them are friends and they join the crowd. The youngest kid, Kevin, I think is just like curious.
Yeah.
Like most of the kids are
most
of the kids are like a little bit older than him. He's like, oh, let me see what this is about. So he joins in. And so it's dark out by the time they get to the park, and you know, a few of the kids are like harassing some bikers that drive by. At some point, some of the protagonists witness a guy being like punched and beat up, a white guy. And then sirens start, and a bunch of police cars pull up, and all the kids start to scatter as they're being chased by the police. And we see in particular the youngest kid, 14-year-old Kevin, gets chased and knocked over by a cop, and then the cop takes his helmet off and smashes him in the face with the helmet. And then we find out that that same night, a female jogger was raped in the park and left for dead. And so we're following around. I looked up her actual title, like District Attorney of Sexual Assault something.
Yeah.
Linda Fairstein, played by Felicity Huffman, before all that shit went down.
I was going to say, as if we needed another reason to hate Felicity Huffman. Like, then she plays this awful person.
Oh, yeah. And so she's there at the scene in Central Park, but then we cut to, I guess it was a classroom at the police precinct where they were like storing these like 15-ish black boys.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're just being like looked after by a cop. But then Linda Fairstein comes in, questions one of the kids, you know, who else was there? You know, one of your friends was probably there, right? Like trying to like get him to give another name. And he does. And so she tells the cop, like, you need to interview all these kids. We need to find out everybody that was at the park that night. And so they come up with a list of all the kids that they think were at the park. And 2 of the protagonists, Yusef and Corey, are walking along the street, and they see the police like questioning people in front of Yusef's building. And so they like turn to like start walking away, but the cops recognize them, walk up, get Yusef, ask him for his ID, which says he's 16, even though he insists he's only 15,
Right.
that it's a fake ID, which, you know, we don't know if it's true or not. And they like start to ask Corey something, but the other cop's like, come on, he's not on the list. Let's just go. Let's just get this over with. But the one cop's like, Corey, why don't you come down to the precinct with your friend? Why don't you just keep him company? Why don't you do that? And he's like, yeah, I could do that. He's like, you know, your mom would kill me if I didn't do that, right?
Yeah.
Like just being a nice friend. And of course, I didn't know the details of this story before we watched this. I knew the broad strokes.
Right.
So you know what's going to happen to these kids. So
Right.
like every moment, every like little, I don't want to say misstep because it's certainly fucking not their fault, but like every little thing that they do to like help the police,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, why
know.
are you going? Don't fucking volunteer to go.
Right.
And so they're all at the precinct now, and we see a handful of detectives. There's like a couple of different ones that we see over and over again questioning the kids. And, you know, they question the youngest kid, Kevin, after his mother had to leave because of her medical condition, whatever it is. And, you know, they're lying to all of them, saying like, you know, the other kids already turned you in, so you better tell us who raped that girl. Turning them all on each other. They get physical with a couple of them, like shoving them in the face.
Mind you, none of them know at all what they're talking about.
Right.
They don't. These kids did not rape this woman.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're talking about, and
Yeah.
they don't even know the other kids.
Right.
They haven't.
yeah.
They're not even friends. They all went separately. 2 of them were friends, but they don't know each other.
Right.
Kevin went to the park by himself.
Yeah.
They didn't do this.
Yeah.
And the cops are making it happen because when you see, like in that, I guess before when Linda is like, oh, well, they were here and here, she puts it together in her head. She's like, oh, they're not witnesses. These kids are suspects.
Right.
And so she puts it in like all these detectives' heads that these guys are guilty.
Right.
These 14, 15, 16-year-old boys
Right.
are guilty of this. She has made up a narrative in her head of what happened, and they're just going off of it and making shit up. They don't know anything. They actually haven't done their job.
Right.
They have not actually done their job. They did not investigate this case.
Exactly. Yeah. And they even go so far as to threaten like their families. Like, I don't remember his name in the show, Omar. He has a rap sheet. He's been in prison before. And so they pull him out and they say, oh, you know, where are you working these days? Oh, that's a pretty good job. Do they know that you were inside? Did they know about your past?
Bobby McRae is his name.
McRae.
Yeah.
And so they tell him, like, you better get your son to tell us what we want to hear. And so he goes in and says just that. He's like, listen, you need to tell them what they're telling you to say so we can get out of here and go home.
Which is like, these kids are still young and maybe haven't had many run-ins with the police. But, like, that's coming from, like, you know, his father is, I mean, I don't know how old his father is at this point, but an adult black man who is like, just tell them what they want.
Yeah.
Like, he knows how this is going to go.
Right.
And, like, we don't mess with them. We say exactly what we're supposed to say.
Right. So then it's revealed that the jogger, who they thought originally was raped around 10 o'clock, was actually raped at 9:15, which on their original timeline makes it impossible for these boys to have raped her, considering where they were running through the park from like 9 to 9:30. I don't remember the exact times, but it was all laid out there. And so, you know, Linda and the other detectives are like just trying to force this timeline anyway.
Right.
One of them's like, well, what if she stopped to tie her shoe? That adds 5 minutes. What if she did this? I'm like, I mean, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. They're making up the story.
Yeah. What if the boys like ran really fast in this like diagonal direction across this area and then dragged her all the way down to the reservoir? And the whole time there's this black officer there who's just like, you know, a street cop.
Yeah.
You know, he knows what's
like,
happening.
yeah.
But he can't say anything.
Doesn't say anything. And there's another part, I think, where someone's like writing it up. I don't know if it's like a story or a press release, and the way that they're talking about these boys and calling them like animals, and maybe it was for the radio, it might have been.
Yeah.
And there's a black woman sitting there, like a coworker, sitting there, like listening to him, like get them to like get this together. He's like, all right, we got to go on air, and she's just like,
Oh yeah.
like her face is just like, yeah, this is what they're doing. Like nobody actually knows these kids who are all we have seen of them are just, they're just like regular, they're 14, 15, and 16 years old.
Yeah.
And like they immediately start demonizing them in the press and to all these like other detectives.
Yeah. And so the detectives are leading Kevin, the 14-year-old, into saying whatever they want. They write it all down. And then he's the one with the sick mom, I think.
Yeah.
So they have his sister come in to pick him up and ask her to sign his statement because he's not 16 yet.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, she was like so smart and quick at first.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, good, give it to him.
Right.
But then, you know,
Because she's like, he didn't write this.
right. She's
This isn't
refusing.
his handwriting.
She's pushing back in all the right ways, and they just badger her. And then Kevin starts to like cry out, like, "Please, I just want to go home." And finally, she caves. You know, she caves and she signs it, and then they take him away.
And they've all been told that if they just go home, like then they'll just be witnesses. If like we'll send you home.
Oh yeah, they just flat out lie
They
to
just
every single one of
fucking
them.
lie to them.
Then Yusef's mom shows up, and she threatens to call the New York Times. She is like right up in the face of Linda, saying like, how are you questioning a 15-year-old boy with no legal representation? Like,
Not
you know
only
this is
that,
wrong.
you left this boy without legal representation, without their parents, in this room with these two men
Yeah.
alone
Yeah.
for hours. Like, that's there's so many things wrong with that.
Yeah.
You know?
And so as the two of them are leaving, they pass by a room where Corey is sleeping on a bench waiting for his pal Yusef, has no idea what's going on or what's going to happen. And then the assistant district attorney tells Linda Fairstein, like, you know, we can't prosecute these kids. Like, listen to the recordings. They are all giving a completely different story. They're in different places. They're not even where she was raped. They're all saying, you know, this guy did this guy did this other thing. None of them line up.
Right.
And So they need like somebody to tie it all together. And so she's like, oh, we have someone. And she grabs Corey and has a detective bring him into a room where they beat the shit out of him. He has no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
No idea
clue.
whatsoever. Beat the shit out of him and tell him exactly what he needs to say. And then they sit down and record him saying what they just told him to. And, you know, he says, oh, I saw these other boys raping this woman. And then, you know, he admits that he was a part of it. He's like, you know, this was my only and my last rape.
Yeah.
And just as an aside, since we're talking about like a produced show, this isn't a documentary with like actual footage. All the young boys were so good.
Yeah.
I mean, like they all were, especially like the youngest kid, Kevin, just
Yeah.
like ripped your fucking heart out. They were so good at like being hesitant with their answers and their questioning and like questioning what they were saying, but like still saying it in like a kind of frightened way.
Yeah.
Like in the back of their minds, they were holding out hope, like that this was the way to go home.
Right.
They were all like really
Right.
getting that across. And so now we see the other four boys outside of Corey in a holding cell together, and they all like start to talk, and they realize like what's happening. Like, oh shit, I lied on you. Like I told him it
Yeah.
was you, and the other kid's like, shit, I told him it was you. Sorry. And they realize they've all been implicating each other this whole time, and then they're brought out of the precinct and they're put into police cars as the episode ends. And that was the pilot too, When They See Us.
Yeah.
My stomach hurt this whole episode.
It was awful. it was really awful.
I mean, especially when they started like questioning the boys at the precinct.
Yeah.
Man, it was brutal.
I can't imagine like my day changing the way their day changed is like
Right.
they were completely blindsided. None of them had done anything. And what they weren't even the people in the park who were beating up. Like there was someone there that was beating up a guy in the park.
Right.
They weren't doing that. They were
Yeah.
just there hanging out with their friends. Like
Yeah.
maybe they were causing a ruckus. Maybe they're like being loud. Like they're
I'm sure they
like
were.
teenage kids. It's like
Yeah,
what we
yeah.
all do. Like
Right.
it just being like having fun.
Yeah. I mean, so obviously this is a show, a dramatization. You know, they don't show these five kids doing anything wrong. Like they don't even look at the bikers. Who knows what the truth was? Maybe they yelled at the bikers or like slapped the bike as it drove by. Dude, I did way worse shit than that when I was a kid, and I never got in any trouble whatsoever.
Right.
Outdoing. I mean, look, don't let me overstate it. I wasn't a bad kid, but
Right.
I did shit way worse than that. And it was walking home like at 1:00 in the morning down the middle of Main Street of my very white town.
Yeah.
And I've been, the cops have pulled me and my buddies over and never gave us a second thought when we said, oh, we're just walking home.
Right.
That would have never happened.
Yeah.
But the more serious issues, the guy that was jumped, there was like one of the people that was jumped was a school teacher. I think there was actually more instances of violence that night than the show portrayed, or at least like directly showed. But Elizabeth and I watched the second episode of this already, and one of the people that were attacked, testifies that it wasn't any of these kids.
Right.
Like one of their lawyers asked him, like, is that person in the room? And he's like, no, it's not any of them.
Right.
So they didn't do anything very serious
Right.
relative to what actually happened that night
Yeah.
and what fucking happened to them.
Yeah. The thing that is crazy about this is that they sat in that room, Linda sat in that room and asked them to make a list of who else was there.
Right.
And then they just found, like, based off of like hearsay from like some other kid,
Right.
she has no idea. She doesn't know who was actually there. Now, yeah, these kids were in the park. But then just to make them all of a sudden suspects
Yeah.
in this case.
I'm just like morbidly curious, and it doesn't really matter, but like, why those five kids? Because those were the five that they were able to manipulate most easily. Because they had like 15 kids there, and then they made a list of even more kids. Like, what happened to those kids?
I don't know.
They just refused to admit anything, and they eventually had to release them. I don't know the answer to it.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious.
It was heartbreaking to watch because, like, I think they knew that they could manipulate those kids, that they were good kids and they were scared.
Right.
And, like, especially Corey was, like, the perfect pawn for them in that situation, because he was just like, he had no idea what was going on. He was asleep, and, you know, like, he was just being a good friend. And, like, we find out later in the other episode that, like, he's just like, he's even when he's doing his when they're recording his statement, he can't read.
Right.
They find out, like, he's been skipping school. Like, this is a kid who just kind of, like, struggles. Like, he's not gonna, like, pick up on that stuff as quickly. He's not gonna think as fast as those other boys.
Yeah.
Which didn't matter because the other boys, they were powerless. There was nothing they could do.
Right. From, you know, trying to separate ourselves from the current situation in the world, looking at this as a TV show, I mean, it was expertly fucking done.
Yeah.
I mean, all of the acting in it was really good. I mean, very rarely do you get that many. I don't know how many of them were like kid actors. Like Kevin was clearly young. Some of the other ones like were maybe a little bit older.
Yeah, so I was looking up Kevin today, Asante Black, and I was just like starting to look them up, and he hasn't actually been in that much. Like he's only 18.
Yeah.
And he like did some stuff. I think he got an award like for his high school, or like there's like a high school level like acting thing, and he like won that.
Okay.
But other than that, like the only like credits he really had is this, and he's on This Is Us
Okay.
now.
Yeah, I was really impressed with all of them. I mean, you know, a lot of their parents were like well-known actors,
Right.
That were really good in this, but I wasn't surprised by them being really good. I just expected it.
It was a great cast, but I was really impressed with those kids.
Yeah. Felicity Huffman really made you fucking hate her guts.
Yeah, Niecy Nash I thought was great.
Yeah. Was she in the pilot or was it the second episode? Maybe
No,
she was briefly in the pilot.
She was briefly in the pilot.
Yeah.
Because I think they showed all their parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll certainly watch the next 2 episodes. There's only 4 episodes of this miniseries.
Yeah, probably by the time this airs, we will have seen the entire thing.
Maybe they're long episodes. The next one's over an hour, I think. Yeah, and I mean, if you're looking for like media to consume to help you understand the Black experience, I think this is a good place to start. It's readily available on fucking Netflix.
Yeah.
I've seen it on a bunch of those lists along with 13th, which is a documentary that centers on race in the criminal justice system, and the director won the Peabody Award for that one.
Jarrell Jerome won an Emmy, I think, for his performance in this show.
Was he Corey?
Corey, yeah.
So I think that you did some research on like the actual story, and then I did too after the second episode. I was just curious, of course, like where are they now? Which I actually kind of knew a little bit because I had done research on this maybe last year when this came out. But I wanted to know like where's Linda at?
Oh, so I looked her up.
Oh yeah, me too.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I did, yeah.
So she actually was an author too.
Yes.
Okay, so you read that.
Yep.
And then after like this documentary, after this miniseries came out, her publishing company dropped her.
Yep.
Because she's still she still says that they did it.
Yep.
And they did nothing wrong with their investigation, and
Yep.
like stands by it.
And she says like it was a brilliant investigation. Oh my God. One of her fucking quotes I read was like, these detectives were so brilliant. Like they were told to go find a tall Black kid that was at the park, and they went out and they found him. Like, no, you fucking idiot. Like,
yeah.
They found any tall Black kid, not
Right.
the tall Black kid. Oh my gosh. She refuses to apologize. She was on the board of Vassar College and another nonprofit in that area. And she, I'm sure, forcefully resigned from both.
Yeah.
But yeah, still refuses to admit that there was anything wrong. I looked up.
Well, and there's also like part of it is like I think there's something very problematic. There's something wrong with her and the way that she went about all of this.
Yeah.
part of it, I feel like she was like so desperate to get justice for this woman who was raped, which
Right.
is like a completely other like horrible issue. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like she was probably up against this, but like what a horrible person and horrible way to go about any of this.
Right.
Like, yeah, that
Yeah.
woman did not deserve to be raped and left for dead. Like, absolutely not. But like, do your fucking job.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I kind of feel like she really believed it was them. I think she was fucking delusional.
Yeah. She seemed like a crazy person.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and certainly fucking racist too.
Yeah.
But I think she was so delusional about this rape case that she really convinced herself that it was
Yeah.
these 5 black boys.
And later, we all know that they were exonerated, and because the guy came forward who actually did rape
Yeah.
her, and he came only admitted it after the statute of limitations was up, because that's still a fucking thing. And so, like,
Oh, he's like in jail for life anyway, though.
oh, he is?
Oh, yeah. He was already in jail for like a murder, 2 assaults, something else.
Oh, so he had nothing to lose.
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
Like, okay.
I think
Well,
that's
at least
right.
he's behind bars, but
Right.
like, I just also think it's like such a, why is that even still a thing?
Yeah,
But-
yeah. Then I looked up the one detective with the mustache who was a real prick. Mm-hmm. He's dead now, but there was a story. I think he was only a police officer for a brief time after this.
Oh, really?
And then there was something about him drunk driving and crashing into a police horse.
Really?
Yeah, it was some ridiculous story because he was
God.
like high on some like weird. I don't remember what it was. Yeah.
Jeez.
Anywho,
What a real winner's working this case.
yeah. All 5 members of the Central Park 5 said it was eerie how accurate this show was to
Oh, really?
to what they remember happening. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
That's great. Yeah, no, I can't wait to finish watching it. It's not an easy watch, but
it's really not.
really incredible. Definitely watch it.
yeah, I mean, the first episode, like I said, and it's so hard to put things into perspective because like we've already mentioned, we're very privileged white middle class people who never have to deal with this. So the fact that I'm watching it and my stomach hurts and it's like hard for me to watch, Jesus Christ, like I don't have to live this. People have to fucking
Right.
live this.
Yeah.
You know?
I just read something that like a quote said like it's a privilege to have to learn and educate yourself
Right,
about
right.
racism.
Yeah.
Like to not actually have to live it. If they hadn't gone to jail for this, like these boys were going to, probably going to have an encounter with the police at some point. Like just given like the statistics and like
Sure, yeah.
everything, like it just, so they would always like have a fear
Yeah.
of encountering the police, but it just really fucking sucks. And I don't know any other way to put it, that they at 14, 15, and 16 years old had to go to jail.
Yeah.
Their life hasn't even started.
Yeah.
Probably never even had sex before.
Maybe.
Maybe. I'm just saying, like, they were young. Like, it's just like... But then they, like, until they're adults are in jail. It's just...
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Yeah, and they showed like, Kevin was really into playing the trumpet. He wanted to be a trumpet player. And like the cops used that to like fucking taunt him.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the stuff might have been dramatized, but like who cares? Fuck those guys.
Yeah,
The cops.
because we've seen it for real in
Right.
cops doing this with Making a Murderer.
Oh my
When
gosh.
they did that with that basically like the same thing to Brendan Dassey because they needed
Yeah.
to like make their case and they just like manipulated and tortured a kid there too. Like
Yeah, a kid that was clearly on the spectrum
right.
because they wanted an admission.
So like fuck those guys too. But
Right,
anyway,
right.
that's a different that's a
That's a
case.
whole different topic.
But like yeah, fuck them all.
So I don't know how deep we want to go into, what's going on in the real world, but I'm sure people that are listening to this are probably savvy enough that they've been on social media and are, looking up these resources for themselves. The best thing I've seen so far is an anti-racism syllabus, basically. And you can find it through Googling it. The easiest way is there's a link, a bit.ly link, bit.ly/anti-racism resources, all one word. And it's a huge list of, resources for parents, books, podcasts, different articles you can read, podcasts to subscribe to, videos to watch, different film and TV, organizations that you should be following and donating to, and then a whole list of just other kinds of resources. And included in that list is 75 things white people can do for racial justice, which I've been linking around. You've probably seen it. And it's just like more like broad strokes things like seek out a diverse group of friends for your kids. I'm just picking these out because this has been on my mind the last couple of days.
Yeah.
Call and write your legislators about X, Y, and Z, encourage your friends to do that. And there's just things that are, a little bit more tangible. Like, watch Roots, watch 12 Years a Slave, read up on American history that isn't biased as best you can.
Right.
Educate yourselves on Black Lives Matter and what it means when people say that versus All Lives Matter or, whatever. Stop shopping at certain places like Amazon and Whole Foods. So I don't know if you have any others. Those are the two that I've kind of been passing around when people are looking for stuff.
One, I've been following The Conscious Kid on Instagram. And there have been a lot of resources, books for children to read, and different ways, conversation starters, how to talk to your kids about it. And we've started to introduce the topic to Billy. Our son is 3 years old. And so he doesn't know who George Floyd is.
Right.
He doesn't know that he was brutally murdered by a police officer, but he knows what the word racism means. And so that, we are introducing it, slowly as slowly as we can for him. But it's important that we start talking about this more and more because we need to be actively anti-racist.
Right.
And not just know in our hearts that we aren't racist.
Right.
And call people on their shit and
yeah, I mean, that's a fucking hard thing to do.
It is hard.
I have, I've been in that boat that you were just describing for a long time. And, why stir the pot with people? It's not going to change anything.
Yeah.
And we just have to get past it.
Yeah.
And
that thing everyone's got a racist uncle. Yeah, well, fucking call him on his shit the next time he says something that's racist.
Right.
Yeah. I remember we were at a family thing and one of your sisters did call
my racist uncle out
your
on something.
Racist uncle out. And the thing is that no one else did. And didn't want to stir, because no one wants to stir the pot with him. So it's just on anything. So it's let it, everyone just kind of whatever. And I pulled her outside later and I said, you were right. What he said was racist and you should keep telling him that.
Yeah. I probably just zoned him out because I don't even listen to
well, I think that's part of the problem. But
yeah.
It was a side conversation, but yeah. I caught it.
And,
so,
I have a similar feeling, and I mean, they're not completely untied, having political conversations with people, even when you attempt to have a reasonable, level-headed conversation, sometimes it leads nowhere or it drags things down even deeper. And, you might have conversations like that if you start to bring this up, but you might have conversations where people are willing to talk. I've had multiple conversations over the last couple of days with a police officer. So to get a different perspective from someone, there's certainly still a wide gap in our ideologies, but we were able to find a little bit of middle ground. I think he understood a little bit of what the Black Lives Matter movement was trying to say, where he didn't before. He wasn't exposed to real explanations before.
Right.
And I got to see a perspective of a police officer who has never had anything filed against him.
Right.
I think there's still some problematic things there, but, these conversations just need to keep happening. And
yeah.
Hopefully they'll get easier.
I started listening to a book, So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijoma Alua. It's on my Hoopla app. If anyone is interested, I download. There's an app called Hoopla, Hoopla, and it's actually through my library. So the books on there change periodically, but you can, borrow books for 21 days. And so they have different, they have ebooks, but they also have audiobooks. So I started listening to that one today because I had seen that on a lot of lists. And already it's interesting because it's like I don't talk about it. And one of the things she says in the very beginning is like, all the questions she gets is like people are afraid to talk about it because they don't want to mess it up. They don't want to say something wrong, and they're afraid of saying something wrong.
Yeah.
So then they don't talk about it. And like you never get to the actual discussion because you're not seeing eye to eye. And it is like everything in this country has to do with race. It's just like far back as our history, as much as like school wants to teach us that racism was in the Martin Luther King days and that's it, slavery, and then it ended with him. That's not actually true.
Right.
It's still happening. I thought like, oh, we're moving away from it. There's all those old people are no,
Yeah.
but that's just not true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway.
So, yeah, I mean, we don't need to talk about season 2. We don't need to talk about if we recommend it. I think we both do.
Yeah.
When they see us on Netflix.
One other thing I wanted to just mention is so I started listening to Code Switch this week, but on an NPR podcast, but a few months ago, I was looking through my podcasts, just on Stitcher, and I was like, oh, all of my podcasts are white. All like white hosts, like, and I was like, I'm literally like, I was just like, I'm only listening to white voices.
Yeah.
That's it. And there are white liberal voices, but like, like it doesn't seem like enough. So anyway, I went through and I think there were I think it was February. So it was Black History Month. So I think they were promoting black podcasts, hosted podcasts. Anyway, one I fell in love with is called The Secret Lives of Black Women. And it's a style that I like. It's like two black women friends who are talking. They talk about self-care and jobs and relationships.
Do they live in LA?
All this. No, one of them does.
Oh, of course.
I know. The other thing about my podcast is everyone lives in LA.
I mean, that's most podcasts.
That's most podcasts. But they always have really great guests on there. And they're talking about, topics that I like. That's the style podcast. Like, I like hearing two friends talk about stuff.
Right.
But their experiences are sort of different from mine. And I just think that that's an important thing to listen to because, like we said, we don't have a very diverse area here. And
Yeah.
so I recommend that podcast. It's not specifically about race,
Right.
but it is. I mean, there's like that's a lot of like with their guests. Everything is about that, about being a black woman in this society.
Yeah.
So, I recommend that podcast.
Yeah, I've been starting to follow some like black wildlife biologists and birders.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there was this issue with Christian Cooper in Central Park.
Right.
Like the day before George Floyd, I think it was the day before. Does that?
It was the same week. I don't remember.
Yeah. Oh, it was within like 36 hours.
Yeah.
And so you hear this happen with Christian Cooper, and you're like, oh man, that could have ended really badly. And then the fucking worst case scenario pops up a day later. But he was on a webinar that I watched today, hosted by National Audubon Society. There's this whole Black Birders Week thing happening right now, which has been great. So many like insightful stories from, black people in the environmental field. And, I'm only saying this because like I have these experiences as an outdoor enthusiast and a birder.
Right.
And no matter what you do, there's always another lens to put over it if you are a black person.
Right.
Another set of issues you have to deal with.
Right.
If I'm out somewhere by myself, like people aren't like crossing the trail You know, cops aren't pulling up next to me if I'm birding in an urban setting and like watching me for a while. I mean, these were stories that I heard today.
Yeah.
You know, like grad students doing their field work in urban ecology, and they have people calling the cops on them, and you know, people are filming them or like following them around to make sure they're not doing anything wrong, and they're doing fucking scientific research.
Right.
So yeah, it's just a whole other set of shit
Yeah.
you have to deal with. So yeah, regardless of what you're interested in, I'm sure there are, you know, some type of media for you to consume to learn more about the Black experience in those walks of life. And I will link to the resource page that I mentioned before on our social media for the next week. So if you go, you know, if you're seeing this on Instagram or wherever, just go to our profile page and I'll have that link up if you're interested in those resources.
Also, at the time of this recording, none of the officers in the death of Breonna Taylor have been arrested yet. So hope by the time this airs on Tuesday that they have been.
Here we
But
go.
that's just where we are right now.
4 days to go. All right, everybody. On that note, if you have suggestions on shows for us to watch, you can email us at trialbypilot@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at trialbypilot. And go on to Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to this. Subscribe to the show, leave a review, and tell a friend.
And thank you to the Beats for providing our theme music.
Thank you, Beats.
And Black Lives Matter.
Bye.
Bye.